So before I give my formal talk, since many of you have no idea what something like Second Life is, let me explain very briefly what it is. It is a virtual world, and a virtual world is different than email or a website or something like that because it's a place online. So this place is an island inside of Second Life that I have some control over, and I built this auditorium myself. I can show you how I did it later. And I have a body here called an avatar. Here's my avatar body. You can see me talking and my hello, hello. You can watch my voice moving here as I talk. Thank you very much. I'm glad. Either you're saying in Second Life that I'm beautiful or my building is beautiful, but I'll take either compliment. And as you'll see here in Second Life, these are other people who have avatar bodies as well. And here's my friend Ludo. Here's a whole bunch of people sitting around. And all of these people could be in Japan. They could be in Germany. They could be in California. They could actually be a man. They could be two people controlling an avatar at once. There's no way for me to know, right, what, from just meeting people in Second Life. This is its own unique social interaction where I'm getting to know people and we're getting to know each other inside of Second Life based on our interactions here. Now, of course, often you get to know details about someone's physical world life inside of Second Life, but sometimes you never know for sure, and that's not explaining what's happening in terms of how you're interacting inside of Second Life itself. And Second Life allows you to build inside of Second Life in real time. So, for instance, here's a piece of my auditorium back here, this little cube. I can move it around, and people inside of Second Life here will see this block walking around. Don't worry, I won't hit you with it. I know, don't worry, I'm not, someone just typed, oh, I won't hit you with it. And I could rotate it, I could change its shape, I could move things around, and oh good, it sounds like the voice is getting a little better, so keep doing whatever it is that you're doing. So this is how you build things inside of Second Life, and you can put a texture on those things that you create. You can do all kinds of interesting things, and if we have time later, I'll show you some of the beautiful things that people have built inside of Second Life. DePaul University has a place in Second Life. There's a whole bunch of educational institutions. The Mormons and many religious folks have things in Second Life. There's casinos, there's clubs, there's houses, there's shopping malls, there's great shopping, because things that you make in Second Life you can sell for physical world money. So for instance, here you see I'm wearing this very nice red shirt. It's by a designer who I think is very good. I paid about $1.50 US for it. And that's physical world money. And if this designer is selling 10,000 of those a month, you can see how it can start to add up. And there's people who make their physical world living through objects that they make inside and sell inside of Second Life, or selling this virtual land inside of Second Life. And if you think of buying an application for your iPhone, an app, or music online, like on iTunes, it's not as different as you would think it would be, right? This idea of a virtual good that people can buy. Over here you see our good friend who is actually up in the tech booth right here as well, who is recording this and is also Henius, who is also here in Second Life. Thank you for the bow. He just did a very nice bow. So this is part for the people sitting in Second Life is probably a little boring because they know about Second Life, but there are many other virtual worlds besides Second Life, and as I'll mention later, for instance, the #1 application in Facebook, Farmville, is a virtual world that has over 60 million members. Club Penguin, which is a virtual world for kids, has about that many members. There's a newspaper that kids inside of Club Penguin make that has over 6 million readers. That's bigger than a lot of newspapers in the physical world. And here, just to see how you can do those kinds of things, here's the first chapter of my book that you can actually buy outside later. But here it is a book inside of Second Life that people inside of Second Life could actually open and turn the pages and read, and actually read the first chapter of my book. And people inside of Second Life, I can actually give you a free copy of this later if you want. So these virtual worlds, they have connections with other technologies, but they're unique, and they have some really unique possibilities. So that's just a really quick demonstration. Now, those of you in Second Life, look to the left where it says the virtual body. This I have a short PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to show, but I'm showing it inside of Second Life so that the people in the Second Life audience can watch it. So I'm just zooming in on it here so that people can see. It makes a couple noises at the beginning because the people who designed it that way. It's sort of fun. I think you're going to hear Neil Armstrong. So what I'm going to do today is first That's just Neil, don't worry about him. Talk about how I came to study virtual worlds and what are they and why should we care? Because often there's, and then I want to second talk about some possibilities and perils of virtual worlds. People often have a very negative view of them if they don't know about them. They think they're addictive. They think they're for losers who live in basements and don't have a real life. I never actually use the idea of real world. I talk about virtual worlds and the physical world because it's all real. Computers are real. Virtual worlds are very real. And so they actually do have, are worthy of thinking about what the possibilities are because they have a lot of wonderful, good possibilities. And one researcher, John Naughton, has this great first law of technology he always talks about, which is that we always sort of overestimate the short-term impact of new technologies. We think that something new is going to take over the world, and we don't realize how over time the long-term effects of technology can be really significant. So that's what I'm going to do, and then I'm going to try and end in about 15, 20 minutes, so there's a lot of time for questions, and then even a guided tour of showing you a couple little places around Second Life if there's time. So as was just mentioned in the very kind introduction, I originally, for almost 20 years now, I do research in Indonesia, which is the 4th largest country in the world. I speak the Indonesian language fluently, and I have been doing research there for a long time on issues of sexuality and other kinds of things. I still love going there. I don't have any problem with Indonesia, but I've always loved technology, and 5 or 6 years ago, I thought, I want to try something really different. And so I got this idea of studying virtual worlds, and I spent time in Second Life, and I'm going to pan out for a moment. And as I got to sort of hang out with people and see how these virtual worlds work, and that I can be sitting here talking to all these people, like here you can see the audience now once again that are here talking to me, I realized I could talk to these people just like I talk to people in Indonesia. And I can interview them, I can do all kinds of things just like I do possibly in Indonesia. So I wanted to try to use the exact same methods that I use when I do my research in Indonesia and see, could we use that to understand these new cultures that are emerging inside of virtual worlds? So this is what Indonesia, where I do research in Indonesia, looks like, the island of Sulawesi. Sort of doesn't look that different from Second Life, right? There you go, same basic idea. You have your sort of beautiful rice fields, but I mostly work with gay and lesbian Indonesians and transgender Indonesians. So here's the staff of one group where I work, and these are not women. They're actually transgender men who've become women. And actually here you see, this is a photo that hopefully will not end up all over the web. Thank God it's a little grainy. Over in the back to the left, you see me. This is from 1993 when I was a young thing working with some gay Indonesians, just to show you sort of how long I've been working with these folks in Indonesia. And I was just back there in June. I still, am interested in doing that research. But then I got the idea of, when I'm in Indonesia, I do what they do. And so, men there dress up as women sometimes. And so here am I with my partner. I'm sitting down there. I think I look very lovely, don't you think? Dressed up as a Buginese bride for actually a HIV/AIDS awareness event in Indonesia. But part of being a good anthropologist is you always try and fit the context you're studying. And in a sense, that was the kind of avatar that I would use in Indonesia sometimes. And now here I am in Second Life, so here I am now. Here's my avatar now. Talking to you now, Tom Boellstorff. So anthropologists always try and be flexible and fit the cultures that they're studying. And so that's something that I did in Indonesia and still do. I don't always dress up like a woman in Indonesia, obviously. But when I came from Indonesia to study Second Life, I decided that I would try to learn about Second Life as an insider. Just like I learned the Indonesian language and learned how people in Indonesia do things, I tried to learn how people in Second Life do things. And I was actually pretty early coming into Second Life in 2003. So I'm actually what people in Second Life might call an oldie. I've been there for a long time. Although a lot of people have spent more time in Second Life than I have, obviously. And so the idea that I had behind this research was to replicate these traditional methods to see if they would work. And actually, you'll see down here, like Jane Goodall grooming silverbacks. A great thing about Second Life is people can back chat in text. So these are some wonderful snarky comments from my friends in the audience in Second Life. And so, yes, I don't think I quite look like Jane Goodall ran, but I will take that as a compliment as well. And so... But I can, one of my friends says. Yes, I could. I'll get a Jane Goodall avatar just for you eventually. But anyway, the point is that I tried to sort of replicate these methods that I used in Indonesia and try and do them inside of Second Life. And so here I am in Indonesia doing a focus group with some gay and lesbian and transgender people sitting around a room. There's me in the back with the computer taking notes. And here I am having a focus group in Second Life. This is actually me with your back there. And these are a bunch of people sitting around, and we're having a discussion about culture in Second Life. And here I am talking to someone in Indonesia when I'm doing my research, and I do the exact same thing in Second Life. The experiment was to try and use the same methods that you use in the physical world. That's why the name of my book is Coming of Age in Second Life, which of course is playing with the famous book Coming of Age in Samoa by Margaret Mead, is that I was trying to respect the history and respect the methods of anthropology and see what would those methods do in a virtual world. And what really shocked me, frankly, is how well they worked. I was expecting that maybe, these virtual worlds are so different, I'll never be able to understand them using classic anthropological methods, but they worked. And what that really showed me is that people in virtual worlds are people. They are human. We're all human, whether we're online or offline. And there are many aspects of our physical world life that are virtual as well. I'm using language to talk to you, and you can't touch that, you can't see that, you can't feel that. Language is virtual in a certain sense. Now, because these technologies are so new, people often forget that they have a history. And that history is really important. So for a couple minutes here, I want to talk about history. That ever since cave paintings, people have been imagining other kinds of worlds, since the invention of the novel. And then things like the telegraph. There were people getting married over the telegraph in the 1880s and 1890s. So if you think about Match.com or eHarmony, it did not start with the internet. And we have email that we use. We have websites. We have a social networking site like Facebook. That's not a virtual world, but it can have virtual worlds inside of it, like Farmville. And then virtual worlds themselves, which include these massively multiple online games. I don't like that term MMOG. It's such a mouthful. We can just call them online games, where you have an avatar and you can interact in real time with other people, like I'm doing here in this virtual space as I'm talking to you now in the physical world. So, to me, the key thing about virtual worlds is that they are places. And in fact, in the English language, it's very interesting that people will say they go on Facebook or Amazon.com, but they'll say they go in Second Life. They actually use a different preposition most of the time in English because they are places. And actually a famous researcher of virtual worlds, Richard Bartle, talks about how people often get confused and think that Second Life is a game. And his explanation is he'll say the Pasadena Rose Bowl is not a game. It's a place where you play a game. But it is not a game. I don't do sports much, even though I'm from Nebraska. I can't even remember what your stadium is called here, but whatever the hell it is, Shea Stadium is in New York, whatever it is here, it's not a game. You play a game inside of it, but it's not a game. And so virtual worlds are not games as such, but they often have games in them or even sort of structured as games. They are places of incredible flexibility. There's people who are disabled doing amazing stuff in places like Second Life to be able to have bodies that other people can have. There's incredible experiments in education. I could show you later, if I have time, the Testes tour, where you get on a sperm and fly inside of a 500-foot tall human testes, and you can see anatomy. I mean, you can go inside of the human body and see it in this incredible way. There's all these amazing things that people can do with virtual worlds. But they do have a history. So to give you just some quick ideas on that, like I just said, since the invention of writing, since cave paintings, in a way, we've had certain kinds of virtual worlds in a sort of very rough sense. But that isn't quite the same as what we call a virtual world nowadays. The first real virtual world began in 1970. Although in a way, telephones created an early kind of virtual world I could talk about later if I have time. When you're talking to someone on the phone, that actually creates a kind of place. But the first virtual world that we really know of was created in 1970 by this man, Myron Kruger. And this picture on the left, for the people in Chicago, I'm going to zoom in on it. You can use your cameras in Second Life and zoom in on the upper left part of the image at first. He was at the University of Maryland, and he had a colleague who was in a different building on another part of campus, and they were studying waveforms, and they each had a waveform that they were looking at on a TV screen. And they had these cameras that they were using, and that was a very new technology in 1970, right? A camera to sort of show themselves and each other these waves, but they were really having trouble communicating. So he was saying, I'm looking at this thing that's sort of like a square, and then the other guy was saying, well, mine looks like a wave in the ocean, but they were really having trouble communicating. And then Myron had this realization that we could take the cameras and point them at each other. And then what we would see is our hands superimposed with a composite image. This had never been done before. And that we could put our two hands together this way. Then we could each see both of the images. Whoops, sorry about that. We could each see both of the images. And he talks about this moment when they did this for the first time, and they were pointing at these images and talking to each other. And Myron moved his finger up. Oh, thanks for the Wikipedia link, Ren. Myron moved his finger up, and his friend up here jerked his finger back, like he thought he was going to be touched. And Myron had this sort of shock of realization that he thinks we're in the same place. He thinks we're going to touch. And he sort of played around moving his hand back and realized for the first time this is a kind of shared place. And he actually created an early virtual world called Video Place, and he tried to imagine what a virtual world might look like back in 1970, and this was his picture. And look at how important on the right here to people inside a Second Life. Look how important bodies are from the very beginning. The first thing he imagines is these people running around. And if I step back now to show you the audience and all of us sitting here in Second Life, you know, things are a little more complicated than that earlier picture is now, right? But he sort of got some of the basic ideas, even that you see, you know, in this kind of situation now, where I'm sitting in this room with all of these people with these avatar bodies. They could be anywhere in the physical world. They could be anyone. We have no idea who they are unless we get to know them. But we are creating a social environment here that is not unique, that is not reducible to the physical world. Looking at these people in the audience, maybe one of them is in Germany, one of them is in Japan, one of them is in Ohio, one of them is in California. To understand our culture inside of Second Life right now, our social interaction, I don't have to get on a plane and fly to Ohio, and fly to Germany, and fly to Japan. That would be a real misunderstanding of what's happening. And now I'm getting them, some of them telling me, Seattle, Sioux City, Iowa, Brazil, New York, Maine, Scotland, Ohio. Thanks, audience. So that's where they're sitting around the world right now. But if we wanted to have a discussion, Poland, there's someone from Poland, Oregon, we wouldn't have to be flying all around the world. And often people don't understand that. They'll tell me as an anthropologist, Tom, how could you talk to these people and understand them without flying everywhere in the world where they are? And you just don't understand how a virtual world works, because of course I would love to do that and meet everyone, but I'm meeting them here. And this is face-to-face interaction. It's a virtual face, but we are meeting face-to-face in Second Life. And people can fall in love in Second Life. People can do all kinds of things together in Second Life. And, you know, people were falling in love over love letters in the Victorian era 100 years ago. The idea that that's possible shouldn't be so confusing to people. So just to go quickly through, I'm just going to go for about another 10 to 15 minutes before I do Q&A. Then some other early virtual worlds, some early games like Hunt the Wumpus. If you're a total nerd, you might actually know what this game is. You actually had a body, see that yellow body? And you would move around in a cave, like here's some bat I've got to kill or something. This is 1972, very early on in this stage. Was an early precursor of virtual worlds. Some of the early beginnings of virtual worlds were just based on text. And if you see everyone in Second Life talking to me using text, you can see that text is still very important. Adventure, which first came out in 1976, was a kind of early virtual world, but it was all text. So it would say things like, you're standing at the end of the road before a building, there's a stream, what now? And then you would type, go to building, and then it would say, there's a goblin who's going to kill you, and you'd say, use axe so that you wouldn't die. But it created a sense of a virtual world purely through text. This is 1976. As a kid, I was born in 1969. I'm 41. When I was young, I played Utopia, which is for the Intellivision, an early simulation kind of game where, compared to the islands and if you see the islands and the water in Second Life, where you can actually go underwater and it's so advanced that you see ripples. That's an incredible graphics capability with Second Life. Utopia, you had blue, and blue was the ocean. And yellow was a house. And here's a ship going after some fish. It was very simple. But it was the basic idea of a simulated world was already there in a very early form. But one of the very earliest virtual worlds was Habitat in the sort of modern sense, and it dates to 1985. Let me see if I can. And it was created by Chip Morningstar and Randy Farmer. And if I can get it to work, now we're getting very high tech, I'm going to actually try and play a short thing about it inside of a website in Second Life. So this was an early promotional video made in 1985 for this very new virtual world, before anyone really knew what they were.
Extra, read all about it. Parallel world discovered, fully equipped. Oh, hey, mister, here's your paper. Intelligent beings, mighty the works. Read all about it. Hey, lady, here, have a paper.
Yeah, let me see that.
5 cents, Pops.
The name's not Pops. I just want to find out about this here parallel world.
It's called Habitat, but cough up that dough, Pops. No playing games.
Jimmy, the name's not Pops. Look, I promise I'll pay you as sure as my name is Valentino.
Valentino? What's going on here? What kind of game are you playing, Pops?
Pops and his friend Jimmy aren't the first people to get drawn into this strange new world where names can change as quickly as events. Surprises lurk at every turn, and the keynotes of existence are fantasy and fun.
So here, someone's getting ready to teleport, which is something you do now in Second Life, 25 years later.
Where am I? And who in the heck are you?
It is said that boredom once ruled the lifestyles of the avatars, the beings who populate this world. But recently, all that changed.
And in Habitat, they couldn't actually talk using voice. That was added for this ad. But note that they're already using the word avatar way back then.
And with the cooperation of a huge mainframe computer in Virginia. Now, using their modems and Commodore computers, people from Westport to Walla Walla can join Quantum Link and Lucasfilm on an electronic journey.
It's an island, just like my one in Second Life.
One that leads to Habitat, where thousands of avatars, each controlled by a different human, can converge to shape an imaginary society.
Hey, listen, my real name's Henry. They call me Pops. I mean...
No, Thickwit. Henry's your human. He's just controlling you. Here you get to be someone else.
Well, then I guess I really am Valentino.
Talk
The
about
idea of having
great
a possibly a different
expectations,
identity.
lover boy. Now let me be a minute. I got some digging to do and some treasure to find.
And I don't have time to show the whole thing, but I wanted to show you. Oh, here.
Impossible.
They'll actually try to show you what the human looks like.
So,
Watch.
rest assured, our Mr. Valentino will hardly be alone.
No.
Hot dog.
Come on, thing.
Oh.
For example, Sveldrella here is an avatar controlled by Luann Smith from Beverly Hills, here on a quest for
With her
high magic.
1980s hair.
And high magic is just what she's found, here in a land that lies beyond her wildest dreams.
So I'll mute it now just to make a couple comments. It's remarkable how many aspects of Second Life were already there in Habitat. Avatars, teleporting, making money, had the possibility of a different identity, and even the changeability of the body. So look at this person changing his head. Look at this example of this person changing his head.
Young Turk. Back in Poughkeepsie, he's Conrad Klein, a lawyer with Klein, Cates, Kipling, and Klein. And right now, he is choosing a new look that will reflect his real self-image, from toe to head. Obviously anxious to show off his true self.
Anxious to show off his true self. So I'll stop it there, but you'll see that what's so fascinating to me about this is how much of this was possible even way back then. And thanks, Henius, for I'm done now showing the video to people inside a Second Life. Sorry about that. And I'll even show just from the still image that I have here from 1985. If you look closely at the text, you'll see LOLOL, laugh out loud. Once again, they were already using that back in 1985. And I think this historical sensibility is very important because not everything about these virtual worlds is as new as people think they are. Then after that, things start to get more familiar. EverQuest was a well-known virtual world that was also an online game, that one of the first ones to really get big. Oops, I've just pressed the wrong button. Wait, oh, there. Let me go forward. This is going to be, oops, wait, go back. Oh yeah, here we are. World of Warcraft, very well-known online game. And then some of them, many of the contemporary virtual worlds now, 7 out of the 10 biggest ones are for kids. Club Penguin was sold about 4 years ago to Disney for over $700 million. This is the one that there's a newspaper in it that has over 6 million subscribers, all kids. Kids love these virtual worlds. And, Alan Kay, a famous internet researcher, talks about how technology is anything invented after you were born. For us, a radio isn't technology. We turn the thing on. For kids, these virtual worlds are just obvious. They're just something that so many of them do. And also, they're getting integrated into other media. So, for instance, the #1 application in Facebook is a simplified virtual world, Farmville. It has over 62 million active users. Second Life has about 1.5 million, so it's gigantic. That's the data as of September 2010. It's got 62 million. So virtual worlds are here to stay, and we need to think about what their possibilities are and what they can do. So in terms of the virtual body, just to show you, once again, this will be an obvious thing for people who know Second Life, but I'm going to stand up here for a moment so people in the audience can see. A big thing about the body inside of Second Life is that it is very easy to alter, and you can change your body at any point you want as often as you wish to do so. So, for instance, you see here my sort of typical everyday Tom Boellstorff look. I've got some nice tattoos or whatever. But if I wanted to have a different look, I could do so instantaneously, and I could change my gender, I could change my race, I could become a robot like I'm doing right now if I wanted to become a robot, and have machinery on top of my head and a big key on my chest that you could turn if you want to wind me up or whatever. So I could be a child, I could look like an animal, like a dragon, like anything. And this is something that you obviously can't do so easily in the physical world with your body, that you can make those kinds of instantaneous changes, that you can't in the physical world. I can't get up one morning and say, I really just have this desire to be a miniature mechanical cat. I've always wanted to just see what that feels like. I don't really feel like being a human today. I think I'll try being a miniature cat and, talking to people in Chicago with the body of a miniature flying cat. But in Second Life, I can. So here I am. I'm a little miniature cat, talking to the audience here. I look very cute. I think as you can see, if I want to fly around, I can fly. I have little wings that flap, and I can fly around. I could fly away if I felt like it, but I won't. I'll stay here. Oops. Sorry, guy, he just fell down. So this kind of changeability of the body is something that's very interesting and very, very different, obviously. Also, the possibility that you can be anonymous. Not everyone in Second Life is anonymous. That's a mistake. Some people have 2 bodies, one that is linked to their physical world name and one that's not. And Jeanette says, and none of us are surprised by this. And just to give you, and so I won't show you all of the ways that I can look, but here's some other of my avatar looks. I can look like a big kitty cat, like a daisy, like a Japanese anime character, a giant dragon. I mean, anyone in Second Life can do this. You can change your look anytime you want. And in many virtual worlds, you can do that. Not in all of them, but in many of them you can. And this leads to interesting possibilities because you can change your body, but also you can have more than one body. And so just to briefly read you an interesting example of something that you couldn't do in the physical world, with your body, let me tell you the story of Cy Fishy Traveler. So Cy Fishy, who's on the left there of that picture wearing sort of the black here, was a person who had just gone through a breakup in the physical world, and he broke up with his girlfriend. He was feeling bad, so he created a second avatar for himself named Beginning. This woman, you see her there, she looks very, very nicely dressed. And he would sometimes log in both avatars at once in Second Life. You can do that. You can run the program twice and have more than one avatar online at once. So Cy Fishy would log on Beginning with him, both at the same time. And one day when he was feeling upset about the fact his girlfriend had dumped him in the physical world, he moved Beginning up to himself and offered himself a hug, as he says. And at that point, he says something shifted. So he did the next logical thing. He started dating. So Cy Fishy started dating Beginning inside of Second Life. And he says, I talk to myself, tell myself the things I secretly wish a lover would say to me, tell myself I'm beautiful and loved. It became a way to explore how to give myself the kind of love I was seeking before from outside myself. So having two bodies, two people that fell in love with each other became a way to sort of take care of that person's own soul in a way that they would not be able to do in the physical world. But one last thing to note before you go, Cy Fishy actually in the physical world is a female who decided to create a male avatar just as an experiment to have a hot guy to stare at, who, as it turns out, is just another case of a woman imagining herself as a man, imagining himself partnered to another woman who's really herself. That's something you couldn't do in the physical world. Oh, and some people in the Second Life audience I see typing some great questions. If we have time, I'm going to end in about 4 minutes, and we'll take questions from the audience in Chicago and in Second Life. I just have about 4 more slides. So there are so many places we are going. I could talk about it for 3 hours and not be done. How this changes ideas of place and time. For instance, the fact that I'm sitting in Second Life right now to show you again with all these people. We're sitting in Second Life together, and they are in Poland, Seattle, all those places they listed. But in order to be here, we have to be here at the same time. There is a way that time resists being compressed in a way that space does not by the internet. And there's a reason why, if you look up here on my computer, it actually says 111 PST, because California Pacific Time is the new Greenwich Mean Time of virtual worlds, as one of my colleagues puts it, because Silicon Valley is so powerful. So virtual worlds show us how time can be compressed in a way that space is not, which is extremely interesting to me. The new possibilities for community and education, for identity, for embodiment, for thinking about disabilities in new ways. Very interesting questions of governance and law I could talk about. If you rob someone in Second Life or cheat them, what laws do you use? If one of those people from Poland does something to me or I cheat them, do we use the laws of Poland? Do we use the laws of the US? How do we even think about that? Ways in which this is becoming integrated with the physical world in new ways I could talk more about as well later on. Just to give a great example from a recent campaign in Second Life of people stealing hair, ideas for hair. It's like stealing music off the internet or movies. You're not supposed to do that. So here was a campaign by some people who make hair to sell in Second Life. I'd rather go bare than wear stolen hair. And so here's a great sort of advertisement showing that you shouldn't be buying hair that that's stolen, that's pirated inside of Second Life, just like you shouldn't steal music or something. Interesting questions about intellectual property law. And so, in terms of looking for ahead, they're here to stay, but they won't, the rest of the slide didn't come in, they're not going to take over the world. Not that long ago, we spent 0% of our time in virtual worlds. That percentage is going up, but it's never going to be 100. It's probably never going to be 20. People I talk to in Second Life, most of them have perfectly healthy lives. They have wives and husbands and kids and jobs, and when I ask them how do they find time to do Second Life, they just don't watch TV much anymore. And when you compare TV to the interactive social space of Second Life, I would rather have people doing Second Life than TV. And actually, a lot of families participate in Second Life together. There are, of course, potential dangers for any technology, including virtual worlds or television or the cell phones or anything else. But virtual worlds in and of themselves, like all technologies, are neutral. They could be used for really bad things, but they could be used for good things as well. This final slide is one that I often show to people when I give these talks. On the left, this is the McDonald's website from 1996. I think they probably spent $10 million to have that thing made. Very high-tech website, right? You could click on the golden arches, and that was about it. Now, over here on the right is Twitter, if you know what Twitter is, or Facebook, where people are sending each other messages. If you don't know about it, you've heard about it all over the place. And people are using these one-line messages. They're limited to 140 letters, 140 characters. Now, Twitter is actually very simple. It's actually easier than Habitat, that thing I showed you the video of. It's just little lines of text. You could do it with an old computer. In fact, you could do it with a dial-up old modem. There's no reason that we couldn't have had Twitter in 1996 or Facebook in 1996. The reason that we didn't was not a failure of technology. It was a failure of imagination. We did not yet know what these new technologies would make possible. So what did we do? We made a web page because we knew about pages of text, of a newspaper or something. So we made web pages because that's all we knew. And even when you look around in Second Life right now, we've got trees, we've got grass, we've got water. It looks very familiar because people start with what's familiar. And you see that in Second Life. I can show you places of Second Life that look very different and are really crazy and inventive. But this is inventive too in its own way. So it was a failure of imagination. And right now, I think virtual worlds in the year 2010 are like the web in 1996. That we can't even imagine yet all of the creative uses that we could have out of virtual worlds. And people are starting to get some ideas, but we just don't even know yet. And it will be fascinating to see in the next 5, 10, 15 years what happens with these technologies and the potential that they have for reducing our environmental impact on the planet when IBM now has meetings inside of Second Life instead of flying their staff all over the world, for instance, for education, for intercultural learning, because over 80% of Second Life is non-US. You can go to whole areas that are Japanese, Chinese, Brazilian, learn about other cultures, learn other languages. All of these new potentials, but I don't even think we can imagine yet what will be possible with these technologies. And as a researcher, that's something that I am trying to understand and learn more about. So thank you very much. We have about 15 minutes left, and so let's go ahead and have some questions. And actually, Henius, who's the tech person helping out, could you just get 1 or 2 questions from the people inside of Second Life, and we'll try and make time for that as well, because I don't have time to look through my text history right now to see them. So if you could just pick out 1 or 2 and then feed them to me, thank you. That'd be great, because I want them to be able to ask a question or 2 as well. And I'm going to pull out now so that people in Chicago can see the audience in Second Life as well, so we can all see. We got quite a crowd now here of people inside of Second Life who are watching as well. So questions, and we have 1 microphone, unfortunately, so we'll be running that around to people.
As an anthropologist, have you done any investigation of the demographics? Obviously, there has to be access to the electronic media. That is a self-selecting group, but beyond that, can you make any characterizations of the demographic of the Second Life population?
And did people inside of Second Life hear that? Henius, you can text it if the mic didn't catch the question. But so the question was in terms of what kind of people are in Second Life. Unlike some subscription-based virtual worlds like World of Warcraft, you can get a Second Life account for free. In the old days, you had to use a credit card, but now you can get one for free, and you can get more than 1 account. So for that reason, it's hard to get exact statistics for us to know for sure. We know better about some of the other virtual worlds like EverQuest and EVE Online or World of Warcraft. And what we seem to be seeing is that it's now, like Second Life, from the company also doesn't release all of its data, but from what we can tell, Second Life has more women than men. The average age of most gamers now is 35, and in Second Life it even skews older. I mean, there's people who are 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 inside of Second Life. I meet them all the time. And Quinn, one of the people in Second Life, they brought a physical world house into Second Life so people can visit it there who can't make it to the physical world house. So we seem to, with any technology, you have an early adopter phenomenon. That tends to be young men who have money, right? And then over time, that fades out. And my research in Indonesia, it's amazing in the last 2 or 3 years, everyone in Indonesia now has a cell phone. I mean, people living on $2 a day have cell phones now, and that used to be a rich elite thing. If you saw someone with a cell phone, you thought they were stuck up. And also a new frontier of these virtual worlds. To run Second Life, I have to have a pretty good computer, and we had to do all this tech setup. But there's now now some testing of being able to run virtual worlds off of iPhones or smartphones. And as those become cheaper, you're going to be seeing people accessing virtual worlds through cell phones as well as through computers, and that will even make it easier to get. So it's hard to say for sure, but it's definitely getting more and more accessible. And I'm seeing some great questions inside of Second Life, so Henius, just write those down, and I'll take like one or two more from this audience, and then I'll take a couple from Second Life. People in Chicago, you can see off the left, people are asking a lot of great questions and actually making really great comments. In fact, I'll increase the size of the type so you can see. It'll go by faster when it's bigger, but I'll make the type larger, and then you'll be able to see, because people in Second Life are making some really interesting comments.
All right, this is very new to me, and I'm enjoying. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm fascinated by what you're talking about today. But I have a question that may reveal my lack of imagination. You talk about the interactive social life in Second Life. Mm-hmm. And to me, it seems that this interaction is safe interaction. And it doesn't expose you to the risks of person-to-person interaction. That you're not, the real you isn't out there. That these avatars are characters that really you've made up out of your fantasies and desires. So I would like you to address what you really mean by the interactive social life, and whether you think that might really endanger the kind of important interaction that or that's valuable to me in my real life.
Right. Well, I don't think there's ever a danger, because people are never going to be only in virtual worlds. But there's two ways to answer that. First, in some ways, it's safer because I could hit the quit button and be out of here, right? If someone tried to beat me up or something, right? Now, there could be emotional harm if someone says something mean, or if I fall in love with someone and then break up with them that I've met in Second Life or something like that. You could have those kinds of risks. But I think virtual worlds teach us a lot also about authenticity, because you can have inauthentic relationships in the physical world. And I'll never forget one of the most interesting things that happened early in my fieldwork in Second Life, sitting in my house in Second Life. Which I don't want to show you right now because I don't want to leave the audience here. But I was sitting with someone in Second Life, and they said, you know, Tom, the interesting thing about Second Life is in the physical world, you get to know people from the outside in. But in the Second Life, you get to know them from the inside out. And there's so many amazing examples where if I meet someone, here, let me just zoom up on a random person here in Second Life. I don't know if this person is old or young, if they're a man or a woman, if they're a plumber or a physician, and I get to know them in a certain sense for who they are as a person, how they treat me. And my colleague at Irvine, Bonnie Nardi, who researches World of Warcraft, talks about how she's a professor, and she has to admit in her everyday life, 95% of the people she talks to are professors and students. And that's just the way we're all busy. That's the way life is. But her guild, her group of friends in Second Life, includes a 20-year-old college student, a 75-year-old doctor, a 40-year-old unemployed plumber. I mean, there's people from walks of life that she actually doesn't meet in the physical world. And I think we don't want to romanticize either the physical or the virtual. And we can have inauthentic interactions in the physical world, and there can be incredibly interactive and emotional relationships inside of virtual worlds. And once again, there's been really interesting historical work on the history, for instance, of love letters. I mean, you can fall in love with someone sending them a letter, and you'd never meet them in the physical world, maybe. So I don't think it's an either-or issue, that no one in Second Life, to my knowledge, and all the time I've been in Second Life, ever wants to only be in Second Life. It augments, it adds to our possibilities. And as one friend here is saying in Second Life, you can have these sort of mental relationships where you're getting to know someone. And I know really interesting cases of, you know, a man who gets to know a woman in Second Life, and they become really close, and then he finds out that other person is also a man. And they laugh about it, but they realize they got to become friends in a way they probably never would have otherwise. They never would have given each other that chance to have a different kind of emotional connection. So I don't want to romanticize either. You can have fakeness or inauthenticity in the physical or the virtual. That's why, once again, I never talk about real life as unique to the physical world, because our virtual lives are real. And humans have been virtual for a long, long time before Second Life or Habitat or these other things came around. So maybe let's get one question. Henius, could you retype to me one question from in Second Life, and I'll answer it quickly, and then we'll get maybe another question from the physical world audience?
I'll just read it to you.
Oh, great. Awesome. There he is, from Second Life to the physical world.
Hi. Cindy Mohindi asks, Do you find that gender differences or inequalities are overcome in Second Life, or is gender something we cannot escape?
That's a great question, and that was Cindy. So here she is. I'm looking at her in Second Life. There's Cindy who asked that question. Great question, Cindy. And there have been a lot of researchers actually looking at that exact issue. There's Cindy is typing something back right now. You can see as we're talking. And she says, thanks, see? There's been research on this, and what's interesting is that gender and racial stereotypes, at least so far, carry into the virtual world in many cases. That men who've tried being women in virtual worlds, it's often an amazing chance of seeing what sexism feels like. They had no idea, they've said, what that's like. Or when someone tries being African American or Asian American inside a virtual world, it can be an amazing chance to sort of put yourself in the shoes of someone else. And it's really remarkable the degree to which there can still be racism and sexism in Second Life. Not all the time, no more than in the physical world, and I think if anything less, but it doesn't just magically go away. But remember, these virtual worlds are so new. And so we have to also see what will happen over time. Because also, how does that question of racism or sexism work when my avatar looks like this? Right? When this is me. I mean, maybe there's like catism or something, mechanical cat discrimination against mechanical cats. But so there has been research that people do, and newbism, that's sort of people who are new to Second Life, treating them in a different way. So there have been researchers, psychologists, sociologists, anthropologists looking at this and seeing that there can be forms of racism and sexism or anything else. But it can also be an interesting space to unlearn that. And it's an area where so much more needs to happen because these virtual worlds are so new. Someone is saying in Second Life, usually non-humans get more respect. So maybe I'll take one more question here in the room and one more question from Second Life, and then I can stay afterwards for the people here in Chicago. And the people in Second Life, we can always do a follow-up talk in Second Life. I think Ludo offered to do that, and I could talk about other stuff too. So whoever has the mic, I can't see you all very well because of the light, so just pick someone. I can't see people in the audience very well.
Hi.
Hi.
I was wondering if you think it's possible for a virtual world to exist without technology?
Is it possible for virtual to exist without technology? Well, as I define it, no. And in fact, for Second Life, you had to have broadband. I mean, even Habitat was really hard to do. You have to have pretty fast computers and broadbands. In the sort of, I have a narrow, strict sense of a virtual world as a place on the internet, because I don't just want to call everything a virtual world, and then the term loses its meaning. So for that, you do need a certain amount of enabling technology, just like you need paper and whatever to have a book. To have a virtual world, you need computers and you need internet, because the thing about Second Life is if I were to shut down my computer right now, all these people in the audience and my auditorium here, oh wow, here's someone with a great avatar. It's a greeny avatar, actually, I know. If I were to shut down my computer, they would all still be here, and my building would still be there, because it's not on my computer, it's in the cloud, it's being held on a server somewhere, and I'm streaming it in over broadband right now. None of what you see here is actually on my computer. It's on servers somewhere in Texas or Singapore or North Carolina, and it's getting streamed in. So you have to have broadband, because that's what makes it a persistent virtual world, not just a pretty thing I've made on my computer, if you see what I'm saying. But then there's a broader sense you can talk about the virtual, not just virtual worlds, but the virtual, and what I call in my book the virtually human. And that can be a much broader issue that extends to the human ability to use language or to imagine alternative realities or alternative identities. And that broader meaning of the virtual feeds what virtual worlds are. Absolutely. Science fiction like Snow Crash, Neil Stephenson, Lord of the Rings, things like that have really influenced the development of virtual worlds. But they aren't virtual worlds themselves in that narrow definition that I would use. And I do think it's important to be careful in one's definitions. But that broader sense of the virtual, I think, absolutely does have an impact. So maybe let's take one more question from Second Life. Hinis, you could read that out, and then the people here can let me know if there's more time or if we have to take it outdoors.
Sure. One moment.
Yes, live music is an awesome part of Second Life. There's a lot of great music that happens in Second Life.
Stefanos Kowalski asked, I would like to know what you think about violence, pedophilia, and things alike in Second Life. Some people argue that they should be banned, and others that it would be a safe escape valve for people with those impulses.
That's a great question. Who asked that again?
That was Kowalski.
Kowalski. I'm trying to find you. We've got so many people now. Where? Oh, there you are. Wait, Stefanos. Oh, there. Wait. There you are sitting. Okay, there you are sitting. Yes, you've got Wow, you got a serious beard there, Stefanos. That's awesome. Okay. Well, that is okay, so the question is about violence or pedophilia. Is that like an outlet in these spaces, or does it feed it? What should you do? And, if I had the answer to that, I would get like a big fat award of some kind or something, because there's there's a big debate right now going on in California with the district court or the Supreme Court there about violent video games. And the jury is still out about, do violent video games make kids more violent? Or if you have sex in Second Life or something like that, does that make you more likely or less likely to do it in the physical world? I would just make 2 quick comments on it. One is it raises interesting legal questions, because in America, sex between an adult and a child, if it's just images, is actually legal if no child is actually harmed. So if you draw a cartoon of a man having sex with a young person, that is not illegal. In other countries like Germany, even the representation of sex with a child is illegal. So in Second Life, there are people who live as children, and they usually do it for non-sexual reasons. It's to be a kid again. It's totally fun. It's really fun to be a kid in Second Life. But it was happening. There were some people doing this for sexual purposes. And the company eventually decided to ban it based on the explanation that in Germany it's illegal, so we're going to ban it. And I agree with Willick. It grosses me out as well. But the legal precedent there is very disturbing or a big issue of concern. And I've talked to the chief legal counsel of Linden Lab about this, because in America you can do it, in Germany you can't, so they picked the one country as to be the source of the law. But I'm gay, I study gay Indonesians. In Saudi Arabia, homosexuality is illegal. So are we going to ban that in Second Life because in one country in the world it's illegal? Is it going to be a sort of lowest common denominator thing, so to speak, where if something is illegal in one country, we're going to make it illegal in virtual worlds? That is a scary issue. How are we going to deal with that? And in the case of pedophilia, I think it's fine to have it banned, of course. But the question is, how do you think about these issues? And I don't have a better answer than that. The only other quick thing I would say about violence and especially kids and these kinds of things is, Madi, who invited me here, who's Viennese, if you ever read, have any of you ever read the original Brothers Grimm fairy tales or read fairy tales? I mean, the stories that kids usually hear around the world. I mean, we're talking, Hansel and Gretel and all that. We're talking cannibalism, dismemberment, murder. I mean, violence has actually been, I'm from Nebraska, from a rural community where you see death all the time because you had to do it. Kids are not sanitized historically from violence. It's actually part of being a child in an interesting way in many cultures. And in the United States, both around sex and violence, we have very conflicted ways of dealing with it, where on the one hand we try and ban it, and on the other hand we revel in it, right? So America, which can be very hung up about sex, is also the world capital for pornography. That kind of difficulty that we have in sort of talking honestly or thinking honestly about these things. And I don't have a better answer than that, Stefanos, because it's a big issue and a very important question that we need to have not just the lawyers thinking about, we love them, lawyers are great, but to have other people talking about as well.